So this is the time when we try not to crowd out other priority issues and we stand back and reflect upon what we've done over the week. I always like it to be, I would wish it would be more like the Prime Minister's questions, where everyone asks what we've been up to and try to explain ourselves, but today evidently we don't have a very large attendance. We only have myself and Andrew Green here at the University of Michigan. We know that these seem to work. We've got quite a few views last week. It was just Andrew and I, and we have 23 views since. So there's good and bad in this. We get we allow people to have their weekends, and we allow them to have the center part of the week for first line work. But it would be nice from time to time to have more interactives. I must admit, last week we were not interactive. We were on demand, and it's just generally a time constraint that me and we'll have some new staffers coming in on this to help out a little bit. I'd like them always to be interactive on a Friday afternoon, knowing the risks of attendance are small because people often want to start their weekend early. So with that much, I think what I'd like to do is to remind everybody these are not very well prepared. They're what I call the unrefined moments of our of what we do. But what is easier to deal with now is that we built quite a few of these weekly sessions where we step back to look and reflect upon what we've done over the week, so that I don't have to. I can build upon some knowledge base. It's all in our YouTube channel here. Before I cut over to that, though, I wanted others to see what's going on at Michigan State University today. This is their new laboratory. I think it's a federally funded laboratory, and it involves some harrowing amounts of concrete. So I've been watching this to see how it's coming along. It's remarkable that they can build during this kind of cold. I like to remind people that education is the largest non-residential construction market, and I also like to remind people that sometimes these webcams aren't very reliable. So there we are, and today's topic, we've tried to put in words right here. And we have one iconic graphic that we've used, Rich, Ted, and I, over the years, and this is the one that, in one snapshot, we believe tells the story of what incorporation by reference is. In general, our society, our world has become so complicated technically that you need to have subject matter experts to write specifics regarding how technology is used for safety and for economics. And so what we try to explain with this graphic here is that while we understand that codes are become part of law, and I'll show you some examples of that codes, what we actually see in the upper level legislative enforceable law, is really built upon a hierarchy of documents that are developed in different ways. I would have to say that the farther you get down here, the fewer, I'm not going to say much less democracy, but there may be fewer people on opposing sides of an issue down here. Up here, usually a lot of what's come up here has been disagreement has been beaten out, and this is the type of upper level here tends to be what is accepted in enforceable and publicly enforced law, generally safety law. So if I go back to our curricula here today, I wanted to reflect a bit on the things that we've done all week, just to give us a little bit of a heads up on how we structure what a typical work week looks like for us. Every day we pick one of many standards or concepts that are under review, so I'll go backwards. So today we're dealing with the TIA, the TIA document for telecommunications within buildings. There's a fair amount in our industry, as you can imagine. Yesterday we dealt with a state level act. This is a larger project that we're undertaking to try to change the Michigan, make some tweaks to the Michigan construction code. They're not large changes, but they're significant changes. And those of you who are in on these discussions, everyone is welcome to these, of course. You'll see what we mean by that. Here we have an international document, one that probably affects large parts of our industry, but it's because it's a new document, they tend to be rather dilutive, but we just happen to be rather close to the University of Texas more recently because of their healthcare facility administration standard, and we were mindful that they are undertaking the U.S. Secretariat, or at least the technical advisory group. I'm not sure which country is doing the Secretariat, but in general our industry is globalizing, so we felt that being at least following along in the development of a global human resource management document would conform to what our marching orders are. Here we have something a little bit more specific on water quality in public pools and spas. There's a few pools and therapeutic spas and athletic and healthcare programs, as you can imagine. And this document, this organization, is being revised. I have a feeling it might be the first version. I always look closely to see if it's the first version. Maybe it isn't. But in any case, it's an important document for us. And now we also, I guess we started the week out dealing with the with NFPA 5000. I guess this is kind of important to the extent that NFPA 5000 is a competitor document to the International Code Council Suite, International Building Code. It tends to be one that is developed in other countries. For example, because of the history, as many of you may already know, that the ICC was formed from an amalgam of about 6 different code councils throughout the United States in various regions that were informed by geographic conditions, climates, and the like. Whereas 5000 was one that is developed almost from, I'm not going to say from scratch, but it was meant to develop a complete suite of NFPA documents, and it has a different kind of criteria for the voting blocks, and so it tends to be one that's used outside the United States because the NFPA is globally understood and known and used. That I'm trying to think of a use case. A use case would be where you are an AE in the United States retained to do a new embassy building in the Middle East. You would go to NFPA 5000 because it's likely that in those countries that the building codes will be derived from NFPA 5000 and not the International Code Council. So for example, the contract would say all local regulations apply, and then you would apply to whatever version of NFPA 5000 was in effect in that particular jurisdiction. So one thing that, since we're on the subject, I wanted you to be able to see what happens if we go back up here. You can see how the state of Michigan deals with incorporation by reference. If I come back up here, I think that you would probably see, if we go back to here, I think I put an example here about how the state of Michigan takes codes and standards that are developed off-site, away from legislative circles and into where experts gather. And so you can see that the state of Michigan is rigorous about making sure that in these different types of industries that the type of code, for example, these are the codes that will apply. Now, what is interesting here, and it does show you in relief what one of the difficulties of incorporation by reference is that it very quickly gets complicated with the issue of access to the codes. Many people believe that codes and standards should be free to the public, and here you are now seeing the charges that are necessary, and many people believe that you shouldn't have to pay this. And there is movement within the industry with ANSI to make sure that these documents are available for free. I think I alluded to that up here where the American National Standards Institute is rallying its member organizations to make the rules that these organizations develop through the codes and standards accessible to the public. You can access them here. So, you know, it's like any industry; it needs some time to adjust and adapt. But I think the voices that claim that you shouldn't have to pay to know what rules you have to conform by have been heard, and they are moving. It's probably never fast enough for everyone, but there is movement and improvement there, at least from my point of view as somebody who's been in this for quite some time. So another related issue is how often these documents change. These documents change sometimes every 3 years. I guess what I'd like to be able to show you is that there's a difference in the continuous versus the what I call the batch method of developing documents. I'm over here looking at another. I'm trying to dig up another document, so these references aren't so hard to find. What I'd like to show you here is one of the American National Standards weekly documents, where they list what documents are being developed continuously versus documents that are being developed in batch mode in 3 to 5 year intervals. So I'm going to come over here, and what I want you to see is this continuous maintenance. Here we are, and see. So there's roughly 235 American National Standard Development Organizations, and of those 235, there are only a finite number. What are we looking at? 20 here. 20 organizations who are changing their documents with considerable frequency. Some of them I don't understand why they need to be be under continuous maintenance, like the Auto Glass Safety Council. But I do understand, for example, why NSF International would need to have a standard change every 30 days. They're in charge of food and water safety. I understand the same thing with underwriters' laboratories, why they have safety issues that come up suddenly. And you would want your organization to be able to change quickly. And so that tells you that it's not a large number of organizations that are doing that. Oh, here's ASHRAE. ASHRAE is changing their documents with considerable frequency. And what do I mean by considerable frequency? That means anywhere from 30 to 90 days, for example. Whereas NFPA are changing their documents routinely every 3 years. I won't get into that. In fact, we'll likely have a separate teleconference on just the differences in the pathologies of continuous versus non-continuous or batch developed standards. I believe that the upper limit is 5 years for an American National Standard. Either it has to be renewed, or somehow it has to be looked over again and reaccredited, or if not reaccredited, there's a word that they use to say, we reaffirmed our original standard, so it might last for another 5 years. So there might not have been a lot of movement on it in 5 years. And some documents and technologies are that way. Others are not. So here you can see where this is dated February 27th, and NEMA feels that the standard for portable primary cells with batteries, that changes to this document are important enough that the public gets to see it in roughly, was it 6 weeks, 45 days, and what does it look like? It looks like we've got, well, it's a recirculation ballot. That's probably a procedural reason for this. In any case, you know, batteries are an important part of our world, of our phones, and so this becomes important. Continuous versus non-continuous maintenance becomes important because in the world of incorporation by reference, there's many complaints that that democracy itself is being subverted by the speed at which so many of these documents, if we go back to this document, so this is the law we have to conform to, but if that
Mm,
law is built upon things here that are changing every 30 to 45 days, for example, then there's some legitimate complaints that we didn't know about it. Now, in practical reality, I don't think it's a lot of cases, but there are enough cases where this becomes a difficulty, and hence the debate and why I think it's important for our industry to understand how this legislative drafting technique affects our industry. Many will argue that it's not simply a legislative drafting technique, that it's in many cases market making, people moving fast and loose, using the American system of using government, lobbying government to make markets for their products, and those are
mhm.
that's all part of our system. I've always been I'm not necessarily hostile to lobbying. It is part of the American system. I think the Supreme Court has affirmed that, and that's just our system. So that means that those of us who are on the receiving end of a lot of this regulation simply have to be in the market to be able to control some of our costs. So any thoughts there? I've talked for a few minutes here. I know that anything. You want to give me a break from talking here, too? Do you have any thoughts on what I've just said? I'm going to put you on the spot.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I like can you go back to the iceberg picture?
Where's my iceberg picture? There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought this is kind of interesting. At a certain level, it seems like this is the area in red. These are the things that people usually notice and fight over and take sides over, but it seems like the real issues are always beneath and below the surface. I know at times you've often referenced that we are in the weeds actually doing stuff, so I was just wondering if being in the weeds means taking a look at everything that seems to be below the surface down here. Like you mentioned, batteries. And like I mentioned beforehand, I sell stuff on eBay. Sometimes I sell electronics on eBay, and there's specific rules and regulations you have to abide by for selling such things on eBay, especially if they have lithium batteries, because we know several years ago lithium battery just basically busted out into flames, and they're overheating in certain laptops. And I think because of that, now there are rules and laws and regulations on how one's supposed to ship such batteries. They have to be taken out of the whatever they are used for. They can't be shipped in, say, like a cell phone, if at all possible. Some batteries nowadays, the batteries are they're hardwired into the cell phone, so you have to make sure that the cell phone can't come on during shipping. If you can't take the batteries out, you have to take them out and wrap them up and so forth and so on. And so there's a lot of standards when it comes to this for something as simple as that. And when we take a look at that, I'm wondering, is that when we talk about dealing with standards and getting down to the nitty-gritty to the point where, hey, the average person, if they want to ship batteries, these are the rules, laws, and regulations. Does the work that we participate in, does it eventually manifest to the surface? So us working in the weeds, making all of this known, getting the work done, does it ever mean that stuff will actually come to the surface, come to light? So basically, what we're doing down in standards, does it ever really come to light in terms of changing a few words in publicly known standards or publicly known building code or battery shipping code?
Well, let's see. Your example is a good one. The batteries are likely, that's an example of a fast-moving technology, and so Nima's probably right to get on that right away. I'm thinking of what happens to batteries in airlines.
Yep.
So, they're the go-to organization. You don't want a congressional staffer, even if they've got a PhD in battery technology. You don't want them writing those rules. Our point is that, yeah, you've got your PhD being hired by NEBA, who's the expert in that, but the person's actually paying for it now. That's us. We need to be able to negotiate. They'll add 8 nines of reliability onto a particular technology, and of course, every time you add another 9 of reliability or availability to something, it adds another order of magnitude of cost also. So I think that it's important that that particular technologies move quickly, and so it does get to the surface. Very often the surface means when you buy a battery, you might have a whole booklet of what all the disclaimers and federal rules are. I don't know if you've ever bought an extension cord lately.
Not lately, no.
But there's every kind of disclaimer. There's all kinds of tags on it. You have to cut about
Oh,
a
yeah.
dozen tags on it.
Yeah.
If you ever bought an electrical power panel, same thing. So I mentioned earlier that I'd point out where the state of Michigan references these codes. So here you have the salient legislative language, and they're referring to the electrical code. It's interesting that they don't say it's NFPA's electrical code or ICC's mechanical code. That happens farther down in the other parts of the organization, the licensing and regulatory affairs area. So they just refer to a plumbing code. A document that has been risen to the level of a code is one generally that has been fairly well vetted, has some history, and it's rooted in technical culture, usually hundreds of years. I'll also mention that, and I think I might have mentioned that some of ANSY's core documents, and I'm not sure where I've got that in here, but some of ANSY's founding documents, like its essential requirements document, they've been around for a very long time. To me, would be like 50 years. These documents have ripened, matured, they've held up to the test of time, they've had adjustments made to them. So in general, when I talked last week about the owner, user, final fiduciary, that those concepts, these here are fairly well understood. They're not over-specific, but they're just specific enough to produce the broad contours of what a balanced market would look like. I got off subject a little bit there, so to answer your question, I do want to make sure that you know that yes, it hits you. In the example you give is a very good one, because it's one that seems batteries are driving our communication systems, and you need a fast-moving standard, and NEMA is the kind of organization that you need to have do that. So we are coming under a time constraint here. What are some of the other things that I'd like to get to? Well, just some facts that are of interest to might be interested to our listeners is that there's about 9,500. There's about 9,500 codes and standards referenced into federal law. A lot of this, as you know, and as we covered before, has been heightened or accelerated by the Technology Transfer and Advancement Act, and that's what 2 or 3, maybe a month ago, we went into detail on what that was all about. But that strikes me as being a lot. And if you listen to a lot of the Canadian debate, and I have, because they were dealing with this a year or two ago, they also have observed that the executive branch is more active on this, and I think I actually made some changes here. So let's go back a little bit. The National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act is one that the Congress developed. Now the executive branch has its own, how do we say, interpretation. Oops, looks like we didn't get that one. Let's just go to circuits. It's easy enough to find. It's well enough known. This is, again, one of those canonical documents, but it comes out of the executive branch, and this is, the subject is Federal Participation and Development of Voluntary Consensus Standards, ANSI, NFPA, NEMA, IEEE, ICC, and the like. And so they lay out more specifics that assert some of the executive branch's imperatives. As you know, our system is set up with checks and balances. We need an executive branch to move quickly in some areas. Many people will say Many people will say that energy conservation is so fast moving that ASHRAE, for example, should be moving at 30-day pace because the world is warming so quickly that we need ASHRAE to do something quickly, and that's why, for example, you would be seeing a lot of heightened requirements for energy conservation or reduction in greenhouse gases. There are a bazillion groups in that space. But I just use ASHRAE as an example because they have a fairly good standards development process, and I've used it. In fact, this week I keyed in something. I keyed in a comment in one of their documents. And we also dealt with the water solar panels this week. Maybe I should start saying how many ideas got out there this week. Maybe next week I'll start doing that. As I am diverging a bit. I want to be able to report the new ideas we put out on the table. So in any case, getting back to what the executive department believes is necessary is to make sure that that the world knows that it has a role in all this, and of course the Congress. Many people, I don't want to get too political here, but many people believe that the Office of Management budget isn't really a legitimate, or they don't have any. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution about the Office of Management budget. I don't want to get into that there. You can let other people argue that, or we can argue that at another point. But it is the executive branch, and they are, by design, there to be to move quickly, and of course the Congress was set up to be how would we say it, a place of a chamber of sober second thought. Let's put it that way. So if the executive branch moves too quickly, the Congress has this, and then of course they can all duke it out in court. Meanwhile, we got to get to some meetings and write some code and get some votes. So that's always underlying this. You will see, and the Canadians have complained that almost all of its regulations are coming from the executive branch and not from its legislative branch. So I'm not sure. I think they call it the Parliament. I think there's an upper house and a lower house there. So in any case, in many cases, you would find you'll likely find that this is not new. Every country is dealing with what I call streaming regulation, and we are in the internet epoch, and the ability to promulgate rules is very robust. And so our role in this, especially in our industry, which between education and healthcare, I like to remind everybody, is about 25% of gross domestic product. So of course we're only the facilities component part of it, but it's still a large chunk of money. So I think that we're coming close to our time limit here, Drew. I want to draw people's attention to the to where we keep these. I'll upload this. Last week it was on demand, and we've had 23 views. So when it's just Drew and I on a Friday, we understand that other people are doing other things, and sometimes it's more fun than dealing with codes and standards, and I do get that. So we'll have to see what it looks like. So if we were look back at what a week looks like, it looks as though even though there were 2 of us at last week teleconference, there were 23 people, or at least 22 people who were interested in this. Did you look at this? You can be honest, Drew. Did you look at this week? No. Okay, so it's 22 then. All right.
Well, no, because I've been on the YouTube channel, and I've clicked on couple of videos. I can't remember if that was one of them.
Oh, no, I'm sure it wasn't. I hope it wasn't. There's other things you do. So I try to point out that it looks like we've got 1,000 views of these. We're going to be transferring this over to a purely U of M channel here soon, but that's another story. So let's see here if there's anything else that I can cover. What did I promise in this particular statement here? Do I think I think I have the gist of it. We can probably, I think maybe soon, if not next week, we might talk about what the difference between continuous and non-continuous maintenance is all about.
Okay.
there are some pathologies there that we have to be aware of, and it's a topic that requires 30 minutes, just like this one does. This is a subject of ongoing debate among legal scholars and policy experts on across the whole political spectrum about the degree to which the executive branch should be permitted to intervene in technical standards development, the degree to which organizations can assert their interests through the legislative process, through Congress. And so I hope this gives, I hope people will always keep in mind our iceberg here. If I could find our iceberg, here's our iceberg. And remember that a large part of what we have to do is goes on right down here. Once it gets up to here, it doesn't mean we're not working up there. We may be working on variations of these, but it's down here where billions of dollars are at stake. And with that, I will close the recording. Thank you very much for your time, Andrew. I'll upload this, and I will see you on the Worldwide Inner Tubes.
All righty.